Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited to share with you my take on an Elphaba from Wicked inspired makeup look that you could wear to a party, at work, at school, wherever, and that way you can channel Elphaba with our green smoky eyes without having to paint your entire body green, because that's not practical when we have to be at work early in the morning or you're gonna go out for drinks after work. So let me show you how to get in the spirit of green for Halloween and create this really beautiful deep autumn, deep winter inspired base to go with it. Without further hesitation, let's get right into this look. Let's get ready to do our everyday Elphaba look. Our eyes gonna be a little bit more intense, so I'm gonna do my eyes first. I do not have on any foundation, concealer, anything, just my skin prep. So the first thing I'm gonna do is use an eye base. You can use any eye base you want. I'm gonna use the MAC Painterly Paint Pot to block out all the different tones on my eyelid. And now for safe measure, I'm gonna go ahead and set my eyelids with a little bit of my powder foundation. This is the Laura Geller Baked Balance and Brighten in the shade Porcelain. And I'm gonna use this just to set right over the eyelids, and that will help me blend my powder shadows on top of this cream base a little bit more easily, and it will give me a little bit more of a neutral shade to start building our layers on top of. When I was figuring out how I wanted to do an everyday take on Elphaba, I found it so tricky because Elphaba is such a popular character, because the second part of the movie comes out this November, and a lot of people I feel like will want to either be a Glinda or Elphaba for Halloween. So how can we do an Elphaba look, especially if you're gonna go to a school party, a work party, something like that, and you want the spirit of Elphaba, especially if you know your work or school bestie or your child or whoever isn't be dressing up as Glinda. How can you do an Elphaba look without painting yourself green? Because for going to the office, that might not be the most practical, or for like a cute night out, it might not be the idea to paint yourself green. So how can we add green into our look without going full body green, because that's such a big commitment? We are going to do a beautiful green eye. I went through my collection and I pulled out a few shades from Sydney Grace. Most of the shades are really common shades you can find in your collection, so don't focus too much on the exact shades I'm using. Focus more on the type of shade I'm using and using what you have in your collection. So we can either work our way from dark to light or light to dark. I am personally most intimidated by my darker shades, so I like to go dark to light, so that way I can control my blend and get the scary part out of the way first. I'm going to start with a small little fluffy pencil brush, and I am going to go into this rich matte brown. For this shape, you can go a more winged, elongated shape, or you can go a more rounded shape. With Elphaba, I noticed a lot of the look in the outfit is very structured and very angular. So I want to do something a little bit rounded and a little angular. So I'm going to go right in between. Using this dark brown, I want to start here on the outer corner of my eye, and I'm going to stamp. If you get fall down, it's okay. That's why we don't have any of our base makeup on. And I'm going to stamp this dark brown eyeshadow onto the outer half of my eye. Actually, this is more like the outer fourth of my eye. And I'm not worrying about having perfect shape. I just want to get this kind of rough placement of color. And then once I have it on, I am going to start creating a little bit of a slightly lifted and elongated shape that tapers back up and into my socket line. When I first was just drafting out this look, I tried doing this in a black, and I tried also doing it with a deep purple. I found when I took this part of the eye too cool toned, it took it a little bit more cartoony, so I wanted to choose a brown with more of a neutral to slightly plummy or slightly chocolatey thing. So definitely more neutral and leaning either slightly cool or slightly warm. And then once I have this side roughly where I want it, I'm going to go to the other eye and just start tapping it on. Once you have one side on and you go to the other side, it's a lot easier because you are just matching the shape. And I always like to start on the eye. I find a little bit more tricky. There's something about my right eye. My brow shape is slightly more flat and it's a little bit lower. My eye on this side tends to be a little bit more heavy on the lid side. And I feel like this side has a little bit more of a slight downward turn. So I like to graph and shape my eye on this side and then follow onto the side because this side needs a little bit more work. So especially when working with these deeper, more heavy shades, I like to start with the more challenging side and then move on to the side that's a little bit easier. Now I'm going to use a matte green that is slightly warmer. I'm going to be using this shade right here. This is a limited edition shade from Sydney Grace called Kiss Me. I Am Irish. It's definitely more of like a shamrock neutral green. It can go a little bit more blue or a little bit more yellow depending on how you apply it and what it's surrounded by. But for me, when I was drafting this look, I found it pulled slightly more on a warm green. So that's what made me love it for this look. What I love about this look is you have like a handful of eyeshadow palettes. Most of eyeshadow palettes, especially once you get around like holidays and things like that, they'll have these kind of wild card colors in there. So most people, if you have an assortment of eyeshadows, you probably have a random eyeshadow palette that has a green eyeshadow. So you can pair that green with some browns and some other neutrals from your own collection to recreate this look. It's not a really cost intensive look if you have a random green and some neutrals in your eyeshadow collection already. So for this shade, I am going to start here and just pat it on. I switched over to more of like a flat packing brush and I'm packing this on the middle third, I should say, of my eye. I was really nervous putting this look together because we are getting way outside of my wheelhouse with these deeper shades as well as shades that are a little bit warmer, more smoky, more colorful. So I have practiced this look a handful of times and that's something I normally don't have to do when I'm putting together a video together because most of my videos and the makeup looks I create, I tend to keep them a little bit more simple so everyone can follow them because we don't all have time to do a full 2016 glam before getting ready to go to work for 8 a.m. So I like to create looks that are fun, easy, and they just make you feel beautiful on your everyday. And with this look, I found the more I kind of slapped it on and then worried about fixing it and perfecting it once I got the colors on, the better it looked. And when you put the rest of the face on, everything comes together. So this is very much a trust the process eye look. This side showed up with a little bit less color intensity. So I'm just gonna pack that color on its middle third. Now I'm going to switch to a slightly larger pencil brush or blending brush and I am going to now use a beautiful warm gold and this is going to help add some life to the look. And with this shade I'm going to pack this on the inner third of my eye. Adding that lighter shade to the inner corner, it's already helped to make this look feel a little bit more cohesive. It's still very rough and choppy, but we are in a good place. So now I'm gonna go back to that very first brush I used. So this is the brush we applied the dark brown with. I don't wanna put any more product on this brush. I use the brush as it is, and we are gonna go back to this dark shade, and we are just gonna start buffing and blending. I wanna use a light hand. I wanna focus first on the area where the brown and the green meet, and then I wanna start slowly making my way up to the edge of that shadow. And then I want to keep my motion a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter. That's why I'm opting for a very small brush. As I get to my perimeter, I want to go slightly above or outside of where I have placed the shadow to start creating a little bit of a gradient. As most of your powder shadows blend out, they will have like a base color that starts to show through. So you can see from this side to this side, we're getting a little bit more of like an orangey red gradient, which is great for this look. We are going to switch over to that brush that we applied our green with. And with this brush, I'm going to again start on the area where it meets the green. If it overlaps some of the dark brown, that's okay. And then I'm going to work over. When I get here, I'm going to buff a little bit just to start smoothing the transition to my socket line. And then pat over where it meets the gold. We're gonna go back to our brush with the gold eyeshadow and we are gonna buff and blend. This time, instead of focusing on the inner portion where it meets the green, I wanna start on the outer portion where it's a little bit more pure. So that way I'm not dragging a lot of the green into the inner corner. So I wanna start here and then work until I meet the green and then just tap, tap, tap. With this brush, I like to have tissue or like a little like microfiber cloth and just wipe it off before we go to the other side. So now that this side's a little bit more blended, we can switch back over and do the same thing on the other side. And when you're doing your other side, even if you can work in a small handheld mirror, step back as far as you can. Switch to like your bathroom vanity mirror if you can, and then go side to side in your large mirror and try to blend there. It will help you get your shapes a little bit more balanced, and it will also allow you to see, especially here on this outer corner, where almost everyone has an asymmetrical face. So sometimes when you're working with darker shadows, especially when you see one side versus the other, and you start applying these darker shades, it can become a little bit more evident about the different asymmetries we have in our face. So stepping back from your mirror will allow you to see a broad picture, and you can further finesse the shape from afar. Before I go further with adding eyeshadow, I need to start taking care of this dark, hard edge. So I want to switch over to my Chic color palette, and I'm going to be using the new NARS Ethereal Aura Blush Palette. This is the lighter configuration, which is called Lightspeed, and this is for their new Holiday 2025 collection. And I am going to use this dark brown matte shade called Zen. I'm going to go back to that large brush I used to apply the powder foundation, and I want to use this shade again. I want to go further back from my mirror, look straight ahead, and focusing mostly on the perimeter. I want to use this shade to start buffing and blending or creating a transition between the dark shade and my skin tone. I found this part to be such a saving grace, because every time I would do the look, I would scrap it before I got to this look. And then I went back to like memory when we were doing like that 2016 like cut crease, really smoky eye look. There's always that period when you're doing these more dramatic looks where you think you've hit a point of no return. It gets really messy, it gets really ugly. And that is your opportunity then to start grounding the look, to start making it make sense. And these transitional shades where we start blending shades that get closer to our skin tone, it's gonna feel tedious, it's gonna feel time consuming, it's gonna feel like they don't make sense, but stick with the process, keep blending, add layers as you need to, and it just helps everything feel a little bit more harmonious. And then I will go through and do that a few times. So I'm going to go in with a second layer, again, focusing on the edge. And I like to keep my brush tilted up, so that way I'm buffing and blurring the edge. And I'm not going to focus too much at this point on my lower lash line. If I get something started like here on the outer corner, that's okay. But for the rest of my lower lash line, I'm going to keep it blank, because when I go and do my foundation concealer, that might make this get a little messy. So I want to go ahead, get that on first, and then we'll go back and tie in the lower lash line to the upper eye. Now I want to start breaking up that darker shade a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to my blush palette, and I'm going to take a little bit of this top middle shade. This is their iconic blush shade in Orgasm. And I'm going to use the mirror and the palette this time. And I want to use this just here on the edge again to start softening and blending. And what I love about using this blush shade for this step, it's going to have that little bit of the golden shimmer, which is part of the appeal that made NARS Orgasm Blush so universally loved for so many people. This is going to help me further buffer and blend that darker shade to feel a little bit more at home and meld with my complexion. And again, once we get on our complexion makeup, our bronzer, highlight, blush, it will all make a lot more sense. That's going to be a good place for us to stop there. I'm going to use my finger, and I am going to go to this green shimmer shade. This is again Sydney Grace. I believe the shade's discontinued. It's called Levy. It's a little bit more of a foresty green with a little bit more yellow, almost like a deep shimmery John Deere green. I'm going to use this on my finger, focus right over where we applied that matte green, and I am going to use this to start tapping over. And then as I start building over this outer half of my eye, I'm going to taper my way into the inner corner just a bit. that is gonna help give us a little bit more of the green to the eye. If you use the glitter glue, you're gonna see a little bit more of that gold shimmer poke through. For every day, I like a little bit more of the slightly foiled grassy green. Another fun thought is if you're someone who maybe you only have a shimmer green, but you have like another palette with a deep navy or something like that, or even a black, a brown, any sort of deep neutral shade, you could apply that under your green as a base to slightly shift the color. So if you want a green to be a little bit cooler, lay something down like a cool blue or a turquoise or something like that. Use one of the other random eyeshadow palette colors you might have in a larger palette. Use that as your base to give your green more of an effect that you want. I'm gonna switch back now to that large blending brush. And now that I just applied that shimmer green, I wanna blend on the edge again. This is, again, help us make things feel a little bit more cohesive, and it's gonna create a really beautiful gradient. Again, take your time. I like to do a mix of these tiny buffing motions. Move in a little bit, move in a little bit, and then windshield wiper motion back and forth and blend. Once I have it blended roughly to where I want it, I like to move my hand down to the base of the brush and slowly just start blending in, and I'll almost work it to this inner portion of my brow. You have barely any product on your brush at this point, but you're just bringing in any residual shadow here. This is going to help connect to where we would typically contour the root of our nose, and it's going to add a little bit more of a sultry siren effect to our eyeshadow look. So you can just see side to side, it's tying things together a little bit more. Now I'm going to go back to that brush I applied the gold eyeshadow with. You can use the gold eyeshadow if you want to. I'm going to take a little bit of the highlight shade from this palette, and this is called Impulse. And since I'm going to use this on the top of my cheek later, I'm going to apply this to the inner corner of my eye just to tie my face and eyes together. Now I'm going to use an angled liner brush, and you can do this with a black eye pencil, a black liquid eyeliner, any type of black liner that you have, you can use. I don't have a black eyeliner, so I'm going to use an angled brush and a matte black eyeshadow. When I've done this look in practice, I've done it with a flick on the end and without a flick. I've taken it all the way in, I've taken it a quarter of the way in. I've done the liner several different ways, and I really like how it looks with all different liner shapes. So when you're choosing your liner shape, choose what flatters you the most and what you like the most. This liner was really challenging to talk through, but what I found and what my thought process is for this look, with the coloring I have today, from the color of this wig to the color of my outfit to the colors I chose for this eye look, I ended up taking this look in a direction that I thought was a little bit more, it's almost like just a deep palette. So it's not quite like, as far as seasonal color analysis terms, it would be a little too cool and I feel like slightly too deep and smoky for a deep autumn, but it could also pull too warm and a little too earthy for a deep winter. So it kind of sits right in between the two. A few subtle variations as far as your lip and cheek color, your outfit, it could go either deep winter or deep autumn. But since it does have more of that depth to it, I found adding a thin black line all the way across my upper lash line really helped to ground the look, and then also the little extensions add a little bit more edge to it. But again, that's just what I decide to do. You can do the liner shape or the eye shape or whatever feels best to you. This is just your inspiration for an office everyday look take on an Elphaba Throp from Wicked makeup look. Now that I've got the eyeshadow on, we are going to continue to blend it out a little bit more, but I want to clean it up and then I'm going to do my base makeup. So I'm just taking a cotton around with a little bit of my Bioderma Sensibio. I like to fold my cotton around in half and go right under my eye. Even if it looks like you don't have fallout, just as a precaution, go ahead, wipe under the eye. I'm going to sharpen up this lower edge. And see, we got quite a bit of color fall down off. Now, something I will sometimes do is if I want to correct my shape a little bit, I'll fold the cotton around into like a little wedge. I can just go right under the brow and tidy up a bit. We can always go through and make any like little tweaks, but if I feel like a shape goes too far up or I don't like the blend at the top, I can use this just to get me in a little bit of like a cleanup position, and then I can go through again and tie it in with like my blush and bronzer. But for here, powder, this is, I feel like, a great place to keep the eye makeup for now. We're going to finish it off with mascara. We're going to blend the lower lash line. I'm going to do my base makeup and now I'm going to go into the powder foundation I used. Earlier, I said I was going to use the Laura Geller, but I decided I want to take my skin a little bit warmer, so I ended up using the new MAC Studio Fix Powder Plus foundation in shade NC13. This is slightly deeper and slightly warmer than my skin tone, but I thought it would go really well for this look to pull it a little bit more into that deep autumn territory. So I'm going to use a little bit more of that powder on my brush, and I'm going to go around the upper edge of my eyeshadow. When I was doing my base makeup, I did my very best to stay away from the upper edges of my eyeshadow so that way nothing got messed up. But now that everything's on, I'm just going to go through and detail around the eyes. That way we can smooth everything out. That way the color around my eyes matches around my face. And I also blanked out my lip color because my lip color is quite a blue purple color, and for this look I wanted to have a little bit more warmth, so I wanted to neutralize that. And honestly, if you wanted to do a glossy, really matte look to take this into more of like that Y2K or even 1960s look, something like MAC Myth would be a lot of fun for this look, which I mean isn't too far off from what this concealer lip is currently giving. It's kind of got its own like peachy MAC Myth, although I think MAC Myth was reformulated when they launched the MAC Maximal, what was it called, like sleek satin lipsticks. I think Myth is one of the new shades, and it's probably warmer like everything else is so far, but a nice peachy nude would be really pretty with this look. But since we're doing Elphaba, I want to take it a little bit more glamorous and vampy, even for the office. Now that we've got that on, let's go back to our NARS palette. I'm gonna start with highlight. I love a bit of highlight, so I'm gonna use the shade Impulse, which is that shimmer highlight that we use on the inner corner. And I'm gonna apply this first. Elphaba's highlighting in the Wicked movie, as well as the stage production, is almost more of like a gradient effect, like a more chartreuse green or yellow green compared to like a shimmer or anything like that. So I want to do this as my first layer to keep it a little bit more subtle, because the way that Elphaba is highlighted is more to fill like natural highs and lows of the bone structure versus like shimmer on the top of her cheek. Now I'm going to go to the shade Zen, which is that more like bronzer shade. I switched to a fluffy brush, and I'm going to use this to start adding warmth and shade to the face. Interesting. On the cheeks, this is pulling a little bit more peachy than expected, so this could be really pretty. Adding some warmth to this eye look is going to help it feel a little bit more everyday and less of like a costume, which can be really great if you're trying to wear this to the office, because a green eyeshadow look is going to be a little tricky for anyone to wear to the office. So when you surround it by things that make it feel a little bit more modern and intentional, it can just make it feel a little bit more easy. I want to layer these two blush shades, so I'm going to use the matte one, which is a NARS shade for sure. That's Deep Throat, so a matte rose peach shade, and I'm going to use that here. I believe this shade has been around for quite a long time, because I remember this shade being really popular when I worked at Sephora when I lived in the States, and a lot of people love this shade. It's pretty much like NARS Orgasm with a little bit more pink and none of the shimmer. I'm going to now use a little bit of Orgasm over the top just to add some rosiness, and let's take a little bit over the bridge of the nose, on the ball of the shin, and just for a little bit of good measure on the forehead. Once the fringe is down, you're not going to see anything. I'm going to go back to my eye look now, and I'm going to go back to that large brush I just used for the powder foundation, the shade Zen, which is that bronzer shade we used. So I'm going to use this to again buff that upper edge of the shadow. All in all, once you get your placement of the different shadows down, this is actually a pretty easy look, and you can really customize it. For the essential eye look, I use 4 eyeshadows and an eyeliner, and then I've used my face powder and now my bronzer and my blusher to soften out my crease edge. So that's pretty simple, and once you get a placement down that works for you, that you like for this look, you are doing just basically an an everyday eyeshadow look, just with some more avant-garde or abstract colorings to fit the character that we are going for. I'm going to use a mix now of the NARS Orgasm and Deep Throat blush shades just to tie in here, add a little bit of warmth next to the green. If you were going to do this for like a Halloween night and you were going to go, say for instance, you're going trick-or-treating with your kids or something like that, and you're doing like mom's take on Elphaba, and you want this to feel more of like a costume, swap out the warmer peachy tones for something a little bit more plummy or rosy. Like another shade I pulled out was this classic little blush from CoverGirl. This is the CoverGirl's Cheekers in the shade Soft Sable. I'll take a little bit of this here. This is going to be a little bit more of a deep rosewood, almost like a mauvey rosewood. And it's just going to add a little bit of gorgeous, actually, hold on. That's really pretty. This is a beautiful color for this look because it's fairly neutral. I mean, Soft Sable is a great deep autumn, deep winter shade. We'll also apply a little bit here. I have loved the shade of this blush for years, and it's been around for years. Oh my goodness, I love that color. I need to take the edges down a bit. Just go over that, but I love the glow this gives. And I think these CoverGirl blushes, you can get these fairly inexpensively. I think on Amazon here in Canada, or even better if you can go to Walmart, they're normally around $5. They've got some really beautiful shades. This is the only shade I've ever tried, and on my base skin tone, this is not my best color, but when I do these deeper, warm autumn looks, I love this shade, and I love how this shade really helps to make that green feel a little bit more at home. So I can see a little bit more on how my eye look is going to pull together before I do the lower lash line. I'm going to use this sample I have of the MAC Max Stack mascara in black, and I'm going to build this up as much as I can because I'm not going to be applying a false lash, although I feel like a false lash would really set this eye look off. Using the sample of this mascara for the last, I think I've been using this for like 2 weeks now. I like this formula. It's quite a wet formula going on, but surprisingly, I've not had any issues with this transferring. For the lip color, I want to add a little bit more glum to the look. So I'm going to use Clinique Black Honey. I want to add a little bit more depth, so I'm going to use my MAC Lip Pencil in Plum. That's feeling a lot better, and I really like this lip color. I like how it's paired with everything, and I like how that more like deep rosy brown of Black Honey paired with the matte lip pencil and Plum helped give it a little bit more of that grounded feel, and now it definitely has more of that toasty autumn feel. But we have our Elphaba green. Let's add a little bit more green. I feel like that's gonna really help set the look off. So I'm gonna go back to my little Sydney Grace eyeshadow palette, and I'm gonna start with my small angled brush, and I want to use the black shade, and I'm going to connect my lower lash line to the upper lash line. I want to do this outer border. Now I'm going to use the deep brown, and I want to use the deep brown shade just to soften in the black. And if you want to overlap the black, you can. I want to take this to the halfway point on my lower lash line. Let the line be a little harsh right now. It's okay. We are going to go through, soften it out a little bit, but I want to get a little bit of smoke on this lower lash line. Now I'm going to switch to another small angled brush, and I'm going to now pick up the matte green. If you want to use the same brush that we're using for the darker shades, you can. Just clean it and let it dry because you don't want to deepen the shade. We want to keep this shade a little bit lighter, and I want to carry this over towards the inner corner. And then once I've kind of got it on this inner corner where I want, I'm going to go through and I'm going to pull back over the brown and the black. You're going to still primarily have those two deeper shades. This is just going to help it feel a little bit more green. We're using those two colors as a transitional backdrop for the green because I want this green to be the show. This is Elphaba. This is all about our green glowing eyes. Just for a little bit of edge, I've decided to pull in the lower liner, and this is just below where my tear duct is. So right around your tear duct, there's that little bit that projects forward. I'm going just under that. And the reason I want to do this is it's going to almost act like a shelf for the highlight to sit on top of, and it's going to make our highlight go a little bit more intense. Speaking of highlight, I'm going to go back to my fluffy brush I used for this gold shade, and I am going to intensify with this brush, I like to use it like a little stamp. So press. I want the drama to really show up and make that inner corner pop. So if you look from this side to this side, it's brighter. We want that bright. Think about like this is Oz, and then that's your yellow brick road. You want the yellow brick road to lead you to the lush green of the eye. Now I'm going to use a small flat brush, and I'm going to pick up my shimmer green that I used on my upper lash line. And I'm going to use this small flat brush, and I'm going to tilt my chin down so that way if I do get any fallout, it's going to go down. And I'm going to press my shimmer green right over top of the matte green. And I like working with smaller, almost liner or brow brushes. In this case, I'm using like a little lip brush. But I like to use these small brushes because it's going to keep this line tight. So that way when I go through and blend and smoke it out, I don't have as much product to blend. And something else I like when I'm placing the smoky under eye, like for me, we're taking this a little bit more into like our Halloween party territory, but right under here is where like how far down my creasing normally goes. So that's going to take place of where my eyes would crease. So now I can switch to my fluffy brush. I am going to pick up the bronzery shade that I was using earlier. I'm going to take my brush, press it down, look in my mirror, and I'm going to go side to side. And what I love about this technique of using the bronzer on this brush is just going to help add some warmth back in. It's going to help marry this line into the warmth that we have on the cheeks. But again, it's going to also help just to make this green feel a little bit more part of the skin. Totally optional, but when I have dark eyes like this, I like to leave the inside open, and I'm going to use a flesh colored pencil to brighten up my inner lower rim. This is the Essence Extreme Lasting Pencil Waterproof in the shade Silky Nude. Just for good measure, I like to go back, use my powder brush, and just refresh under my eyes a little bit. Let's get these hair clips down. This wig, I have not trimmed the bangs yet. The bangs are really long. So when I was adjusting the curl, I tried to curl them under and give them more of that curtain frame style. It's a little bit more modern. It would make it feel a little bit more officey for the look. But let's bring that down. I'm gonna finger comb through this. For the hair, I just wanted to give it a little bit more of a blowout vibe. So I took a 1.5 inch iron and I curled everything going under, and then when I released the curls, I did a spiral twist on them using my fingers. So I just swirled everything going back to help stretch and lengthen the curl after I took it out of the pin curls, so that way it would stretch out the waves so it didn't feel so uptight. This is a fully heat-friendly synthetic wig. It was like $30 on Amazon. So to make it not look so boxy, I wanted to give it a little bit of zhuzh. If you're working with a synthetic wig that's not heat-friendly, you can still do the pin curls. Just then I like to hang it upside down, take a steamer, blast it with a warm steam, and let that steam set the curls in place. These wigs, they're by a brand called Wavy or something like that. I've got a handful of them I use for different videos. They're around $30. They all have like a hard front. There's no lace front here. Like it's just this hard edge, but they normally come with bangs. You can trim them, and they have this built-in scalp. I just take a little bit of my concealer shade, put it there so that way the part here matches my skin tone a little bit better. And this color that I went with is called Black Round. Definitely outside of my normal wheelhouse, but I felt like it did well for this look. Now to finish off our Elphaba look, we need a fragrance. And when I was thinking about a deep, moody, bewitching scent, I thought of YSL Black Opium. This is such a classic. And that's gonna complete our everyday wearable inspired by Elphaba Throp from Wicked makeup look. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know on what your thoughts are on my interpretation of an everyday Elphaba look, and let me know what you are planning to be for Halloween. We've got 2 weeks until Halloween, so I'm very, very excited to hear in the comments what you're thinking about dressing up as, or what your plans are for the holidays. I think this year I'm gonna have a movie night at home. So until we see each other again, I hope you're taking care of yourself wherever it is you're on the world, and I will see you later. Bye, y'all.